So I'm going to turn the floor over to Finley DeGraffenreid, City Manager.
Mayor and Council, I wanted to take this opportunity by the authority granted of my position to announce the appointment of Jody Cummings to the position of Chief of Police for the city of Lampasas. As of September of this year, Chief Cummings will have been employed by the city for 30 years. He is a model of dedication, integrity, and service. And Council, this has been one of the easiest decisions I've ever had to make in my career. I'll leave my comments there, but I do have some new collar brass for Chief Cummings, and I'm sure he would like to have maybe Renee pin that for him.
Yes. Let's have a round of applause. Congratulations.
Yep. We could have some folks up for pictures.
You doing all right? Everyone, come on up for some punch and cookies. You guys want to go down for punch and cookies?
Sure.
Punch and cookies. Punch and cookies. I do want to talk to you. I'm just kind of irritated. Not at you. No. Y'all go get some punch and cookies. Christy, are we ready? We're ready when you say so. Okay. Good afternoon again. We'll call this special session to order. And at the first meeting, following each regular election of council members, the council shall elect one of its members as mayor pro tem, who shall serve in such capacity at the pleasure of the council. The mayor pro tem shall act as mayor during the absence or disability of the mayor and shall have the power to perform every act the mayor could perform if present. This includes, but not limited to, signatory authority, personal appearances, addressing citizen concerns, attending community engagements, point of contact for citywide emergencies, and so forth. At this time, I will entertain nominations for the mayor pro tem for the 2022-2023 term.
Mayor, I'd like to nominate Chuck Williamson.
We have one nomination. Are there any others?
I'll second that.
Are there any others before we second? No? Is your speaker on?
I'd like to nominate Zach.
Zach Morris. We have two nominations. Are there any further nominations? We'll take a motion for Chuck Williamson. And I had a second. All those in favor of Chuck for mayor pro tem?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Was that three? Second nomination is for Zach Morris. All those in favor of Zach?
Aye.
Two. Is that your observation as well, Becky? 3-2. We'll go forward with Chuck Williamson as mayor pro tem for the year 2022 to 2023. We'll adjourn the special session. If I could get a motion.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
At this point, we'll call to order the workshop session. The first item is a discussion regarding the recap from council work session held on May 19, 2022.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to review and perhaps restate and get you to either correct my recollections and what the minutes said or push me in a different direction. But just in terms of a quick review, we did review fund balances, those projects that were being funded by Fund 40, which are the hotel occupancy tax funds, and those, of course, we do not consider those operating funds. Those are a separate pool of money that have certain restrictions on them for their use, but in no way can be used for operating purposes. We did talk about the New Hope Baptist Church and the historic colored school, and I think what we want to let council know is that what we heard is that the time for investment perhaps was down the road, but it was certainly incumbent upon us as staff and as council to make sure that we respects those institutions and keep them up and make sure that we're doing periodic checks and maintaining them to the best of our ability, as well as look for opportunities either to partner or to otherwise find ways to use them without extensive city resources. In terms of the skate park, what we heard as staff is that there was a consensus to maintain and to continue to move forward with the understanding that council, under the contract that we have as a design-build contract, you have the ability and the prerogative to go, no-go at any portion of this process. I think one of the things that is in your packet for consideration further is kind of an alternative that staff has come up with between last Thursday's meetings and tonight, which is we feel like we can even get that estimate down even further on that pad by hedging against the spikes in fuel and materials by pre-purchasing the base material, stockpiling it at the city yard, and then even doing some forced labor hauling, which for that amount should not be an imposition upon our workforce. We think we can get that price down significantly in terms of the construction of that pad. So that's certainly the direction that we'd like you to consider when this comes up on the regular agenda. We did also spend some time, and Ryan is going to wrap up on some of the findings of the market challenges and deficiencies we have in our workforce and attracting and keeping them. I think one of the messages that you'll probably hear me say in the future, agenda item as well as after Ryan talks, is that this is we need to make compensation a part of a plan. It's not just compensation that keeps employees, it's the working environment, it's the benefits, it's the opportunity to grow and excel, it's training, it's being a part of a team, it's all of the other things that we include in a recruitment and retention plan. Those are just the high spots, but I'm certainly interested to hear from council if maybe there was something I missed in my comments or something that was missed in the minutes.
Well, I'll just reiterate how helpful I feel this format has been. Gets all the information out in one spot, and we're able to ask questions, get all the information we need concerning each project. That's just my thoughts. Anyone else?
I mean, I think they've been real productive, but I also believe if there's going to be citizen comments or folks coming in, that there needs to be some parameters around that. One thing that happened during that meeting was about half of the meeting was basically talking with past council members and citizens about this skate park, which I thought was nice, but kind of counterproductive for us getting together and talking about further projects. So I just like to look at the parameters there, seeing as we have times at every one of our sessions for citizen comments for what's on the agenda or things that are not on the agenda. There needs to be some kind of regulation, I feel like, there, so it doesn't go off the rails.
Anyone else? Then we're all good, Penley.
Thank you, and certainly we'll have the opportunity to discuss some of these items more specifically further in this agenda and on future agendas if that's council's wish.
Thank you. Next item is discussion regarding salary comparison data among municipalities. Mr. Ward?
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. As we met on Thursday, May 19th, this is a follow-up to that and the compensation study that staff's been working on. We've been trying to vet different cities, how they go about their compensation plans, how they look towards the future and look at, career ladder, putting in place some of those things. So just want to talk a little bit about that today. If everybody has the TML survey paperwork, which has the bar graph on it, some of the comments and some of the feedback from our workshop meeting were in regards to this specific kind of diagram that we had. So to try to make it easy, this one's structured, and it makes probably more sense than the previous one. So the 0% is the baseline. That's on one of them, it's the mean salary or the midpoint. The other sheet is actually the average. And as you can see, when you look at both of these, they're very, very similar. Some of the positions that were right on the baseline, some fell on one of them on the mean, higher, and then lower on the average salary. So to give you a little bit of background on that, beginning with the accounting specialist and to kind of give you some insight on what we looked at, we tried to compare various cities similar in size as well as some that were a little bit larger. So we reached over to Brownwood, and they had done, the Texas Municipal League had done about a 20 position survey on 20 different job positions throughout the state. And so several cities participated, several didn't. Some of the ones close to us did not, but we reached out for information. City of Burnett was one that wasn't out there, but we did get some of their information through a open records request that they'd submitted to us in response. But just wanted to kind of, make sure everybody was aware what we did on the TML survey and kind of how we looked at coming up with salary ranges and the existing salary ranges. But to go through this, I think one other thing I'd like to point out, and I think everybody also has the list with the salaries broken out. What I tried to do was show in red the low salary in that range. Green is the high salary, and then the blue is typically Lampasas. So in most of these, we're kind of close to the middle. As you can see, some of the percentages, and some of the percentages are significant. For example, court clerk is 21.2% if you were to try to look at the base salary on that position and get it up to the average. However, on some of the positions, based on the salary, that could be lower dollar amounts to get to that same point than it could be for some other positions where the salary's a little bit higher. So I just wanted to point that out as well. Does anybody have any questions on
So
any of the?
on the percentage of the main salary, TLM survey, so this would be on the 0 would be the average.
That's
is
correct.
What we're looking at and this is from the cities that you looked at.
Correct.
Okay, which would be Brownwood, Burnett.
Brownwood, Burnett. We also had in that, there was Hitchcock, I believe, Breckenridge. I think there was a few from the town of Joshua. I think there was one or two more. Some of them provided information for some positions, some of them didn't, so it was kind of a mix. What I tried to do on some of these, though, if there was a real discrepancy or disparity in between the low salary and what was kind of in the middle. So, for example, there was one, and I believe it was the city secretary. I think it was, $30,000 difference from the first lowest salary. So on some of those, I struck that out just because of either the size of the town or the city or other factors. So I tried to make sure the best apples to apples comparison that I could make, and sometimes that's difficult, when you're looking at other cities. But
So on the accountant specialist here, we're at 13.81%. That would basically, just so I understand that means we're about 13% under the average. Is that correct?
that's correct. So, for example, on that one, council member, 47,133 is the Lampasas salary, and if you multiplied it times that 13.81%, you would get the actual mean on this first sheet or on the next one.
I got you.
You get to the average.
Do you have a chance to talk to anyone like over in Gatesville or Coryell County?
I think Gatesville actually did participate on some of the TML service positions. So they are, I think, included on some of them. They weren't, I don't think they were in every category. Marble Falls was in here, Fredericksburg. I believe Gatesville did submit the building official. They were actually in that one, as well as a few other ones. So we tried to get as close as we could in the proximity, to Lampasas. So, and one thing I'd probably note on that as well, when you're looking at comparing, or at least trying to compare apples to apples, city size, staff size, you also want to take into account, the proximity we are to those cities that we're competing against. And, I think the obvious scenario is Burnett's the closest, and as we go to the next group of data, that's really what we're kind of comparing, is because they're within that driving distance. Not to say that there's some other cities around like Copper's Cove that's not within driving distance, or Killeen or Liberty Hill. There are other cities that are, within a pretty short radius that you could drive to, but we were kind of comparing it more as you get to Public Works when I get to that one, to Burnett, and we did have numbers from Fredericksburg as well. Again, Fredericksburg is it's hard to compare apples to apples based on their sales tax revenue and other factors in their property tax and some of those things. So it's, I
And
tried
as
to
I-
really,
I'm fond of reporting that. You do need to keep that in mind. Sources of revenue for all the other counties or cities that you've talked to come up with these numbers.
Ryan, is there any other perks that, this is just based on salary, is that correct?
this is.
Okay, so is there anything that we do that's part of the total package that these other cities are not currently doing? Such
So-
as insurance, retirement, you know, the benefits.
Right. I think the benefits in most instances are fairly similar. The one thing I did notice at looking through different cities, how they've structured either longevity pay or there's also, I don't know what category you'd put it in, but there's another classification of pay as well as longevity. From the standpoint of the city of Lampasas, I think our benefits match well or better than some of the other cities that we compare to
know-
as far as retirement.
I know that there's some cities that match 1-to-1 on retirement, and we match 2-to-1, which is an advantage for us.
Right. Yeah, it is an advantage because a lot of cities aren't doing 2-to-1 with the 7%.
That's on the retirement. The only other thing that I would ask is that first thing comes to mind is most of the departments have an advancement program protocol that they can train up on and move up in rank. There are 2 departments that I can think of right off the bat, Parks and Streets, that I don't believe have anything written specifically.
Right.
But I would like to see that all departments have the advancement program.
I would agree, and I think that's one of the pieces we'll look at as we go, kind of dive in a little deeper on this, but
I just think
that's one
I
of
just
the,
think it's really important for them to have some incentive
right.
to train, to move up and be better at their position.
And I think that what goes along too with that as well is the certification pay on top of, you know, for example, wastewater, water, there's certain licenses required by the state. And as those individuals move up, having that certification pay, we do have a process in that group already. But comparing us to other cities, you know, there's some improvements we could make on that as well. But I think the career ladder piece is big to have the ability for folks to move, you know, and continually move up if they, you know, if they're willing to, you know, take that next step and get the training or get the certification. So it's really an important
Well,
piece.
I believe in trying to pay our crew as best we can afford, but I also don't want to just hand it out with some incentive for them to improve their own.
I would agree. Are there any other questions on this or?
I think probably what they're looking for from us is perhaps a nod that this should go further. They should do some more studies. They should come up with something for us to look at maybe the next session that we can incentivize our employees a little bit better and go forward with some jumps and increases for those licenses that we'd talked about.
Thank you, Mayor.
Is that
That-
everyone's consensus that that would be a thing to do?
Okay. Did y'all want to go over the rest of them, or do y'all feel good from the work session?
I don't
Do you need
completely
more?
understand how this is lined up, what
Okay.
the 3 columns are, and
Okay, we can go over this one. So this is the comparison, this form is the comparison with the green, yellow, and white between Fredericksburg, Burnett, Lampasas. What we did was try to compare, as you can see, the first one, apprentice lineman. We went down through the electric department. So those, each 3, if there's a white line, a green line, and a yellow line, those are broken down for that specific city. And then the dollar amounts are the salaries at the base, the midpoint, and then the high. So that's the 3 different salaries. And the comparison in this study was Lampasas compared to, which it was typically Burnett. The next one closest to us, I tried not to compare salaries, you can see some of the disparity between Fredericksburg, where we're at. So I tried to focus just on Burnett. So that's where the percentages are. And then the far column with hourly increases, if you were to match what that base pay is, then that would be the dollar amount an hour increase it would take to get there.
I guess I'm still confused about these three columns here where it says Fredericksburg and Burnett. So each column means what?
So over here on the side where it's got Fredericksburg, Burnett, and Lampasas.
Right.
This is just Fredericksburg and Burnett compared to us is all that is. But this is the base, and then the median, and then the high on the salaries.
Those represent a salary range that's part of our salary administration. So for that position, the minimum pay is that first column. The midpoint of that salary range is represented in the second, and then the
Gotcha.
high end
Okay.
is within
Gotcha.
that range.
Gotcha.
Yeah, the FB or the FBG
Gotcha.
for Fredericksburg and Burnett are.
Okay.
And are these salaries, is it the whole comprehensive package of insurance, retirement, and everything? This is just base pay, is that correct?
Based solely on salary,
Okay,
unburdened.
okay.
And so once a year, Herb, they do send out a burden amount for each employee to know how much they're actually making with their benefits.
Okay.
It's my understanding you're still doing that, right?
Yes, we are. So briefly, this one goes along with Councilman Morris's questions on the spreadsheet. And you can see the graph and kind of how that tracks. It's anywhere from, 20.2% to 25.8%. And again, that's the average based on comparisons from us to Burnett specifically. And that covers electric, parks, water, wastewater, and streets. And then the last few documents that you have are PD. So again, some of the information was requested so that you can see the breakdown, position-based, Lampasas comparative to Burnett, and their structured scale system that they have there for longevity and various officer pay. So I wanted to make sure everyone had that information, as well as what we went over previously, the PD pay scale comparison between Lampasas and Burnett, as well as longevity. And I might, on the longevity, mention, what we see in PD, where we have kind of that gap in officers' experience based on years. At 9 years, the next closest officer is 17 years of experience, so there is a gap there. And we do see that in several of our positions, whether that's in public works, with folks with certifications, or other areas of the city where, folks start getting the longevity, but then there's other opportunities out there. And so, sometimes you do lose individuals, but that's our intent and our goal not to.
So as we're thinking about becoming a little bit more competitive, we're not thinking just about merely the starting salary. We're thinking along the cross the starting, the middle, and towards somebody that's been seniored by years. Is that what we're thinking about?
That's correct, Councilman Pierce, is we're trying to look at that from kind of a holistic standpoint and look at if we increase that salary, in phases or steps, or how we do that it's across the board. But again, I think it goes back to Councilman Clark's message, which was, we want to build in that career ladder, across the board at the city. So it's not just specific groups, but,
Right.
You have to kind of start chipping away, when you can, to make that, push to get there, so.
Okay.
I'm sure what we're looking at then is a retention plan for hopefully some of our employees, PD, fire department, our line crew. So with the increase, kind of adjust it according to what we have, what their skill is, and then retain them for future so we don't lose them to burn it or PEC or LCRA, so.
That's correct. Yeah, we want to make sure the individuals that we do train, that we keep those folks here and, you know, as part of the organization. So we do want to, you know, incentivize that, you know, how we can. And I think the one last thing I would mention on that topic is, you know, there's other things that other cities do that's non-monetary for employees. So leveraging certain, you know, services that the city already provides or discounted services. For example, most recently in working for the county, they had a program in place where they paid for, you know, to improve folks' health in the organization, they paid for a gym membership. So there's things, you know, we have a golf course, we have the swimming pool, we have opportunities there. If there was some, you know, idea that council wanted to look into that, we can definitely, you know, look into that and see, you know, I mean, I think with younger folks, more and more coming into the workforce, you kind of have to reach outside the box a little and see what incentivizes, you know, coming to work at different places.
Money is not always
Yeah,
the
that's
only
correct.
thing. Anyone else? Thank you, sir.
Ryan.
Thank you.
Next item is discussion regarding the fire department incident reporting and billing.
Good
Chief
evening, Mayor
Smith.
and Council. How are y'all this evening? This item is back on the agenda again, and for the newer council members, this originated back in November or December or so. We brought it back up again last council meeting, but there was some questions about this as far as that were directed by Councilman Morris, but I'll go ahead and refresh everything on this so that everybody has an opportunity to understand exactly where we're at with this. The fire department uses a third-party biller, Fire Recovery USA. We send, whenever we make incidents, accidents, that type of stuff, if it's more than just your typical couple of cars collided, we send a bill for the services that we provide. If we do cleanup on the roadway, that type of stuff, we find out the carrier or the insurance company if we do extrication, and we bill that insurance company. Back in the fall, we received information from our company, Fire Recovery USA, and they said that they were starting to get pushback from insurance companies as far as whether or not they were paying the invoices. The reason that they were not paying these invoices is because we were billing them directly versus billing the customer. So they suggested that we bill the customer directly and that they would pass it on to them. So at that time, we had brought this before you. No decision was made, and that's when we came to the point where we got information from Fire Recovery USA that we needed to go ahead and act in one way or another. We either needed to start sending bills again, or we needed to not renew our membership with them.
May I just ask at this point, how much is that membership?
It would be $100 to just go to where we didn't do anything for a year. If we came back to doing it, it would be $500. So with that information, when we brought this up for discussion again, Councilman Morris asked a good question as far as, is there any follow-up from this insurance company with the companies that they're dealing with? And he wanted to know if they had attorneys on staff. I was able to get that information. They do have attorneys on staff. After some talk and dialogue between the company and I, they made it pretty clear that a lot of times in dealing with the insurance companies, they're going to stand their ground on the fact that, hey, we're not interested in doing this because you have not ever sent a bill to the client, even though you sent us a bill. It's their job to present this to us. They also feel like the insurance companies are not that afraid of going to court and finding out something about that. That was just talk between us as far as they feel like they're not always that good with getting any type of recovery from the insurance company themselves, and therefore, even with their attorneys, they have found that the easiest path to getting that bill to the insurance company and having compliance from the insurance company is sending it to the customer themselves versus the insurance company.
Can I ask a few questions?
Yes, I hope I can answer them.
Oh, no, you're good. You're good. Thank you for following up on that.
Oh, absolutely.
So I know it's not a whole lot of money we're paying them, but it sounds like they do have attorneys, but those attorneys are scared of insurance companies because they're not really pushing them. And if I get this right, it said the bigger insurance companies would rather just go to court? That's crazy.
I agree.
Yeah, I don't think we need to pay them for anything. If we're going to try to recover anything on any of these accidents, I think we ought to hire outside counsel. I don't know, what do you think about that?
I don't know how that would work as far as if we hire outside counsel, because we're using a third party, and you can correct me on this, I won't take any offense to it, but we're using a third party provider. We simply send them a bill for the services that we provide at an accident scene. Therefore, they send it to that insurance company. How it had worked historically is insurance companies would pay that bill. Now the insurance companies are saying it's not a valid bill because you didn't send it to the individual, you sent it to the insurance company. You need to bill the individual, and then they can pass it on to us.
I was just thinking that, well, I've seen some of these insurance companies have puffed their chest out during the pandemic because they weren't getting forced to task to have to go to court, actually, but that's changing now. And so with this third-party business, basically, we're saying, hey, y'all do the work, send the bills out, and then we'll talk to the insurance company, but if they don't want to pay, sorry.
We actually send the bill to Fire Recovery USA. We provide them with the information, and they're the ones that send the bill out. But they have to have our authorization to send it to the individual.
Oh, okay, okay.
Chief, what, kind of on a truck rollover, what would be the estimate cost and what would be our liability?
As far as liability, you talking about the amount of money that we would spend on that?
Yes, sir.
Well,
That we're trying to recover.
historically, we've recovered $108,000 from them, and I think that runs a path over about 15 years that we've been doing business with them. So it's not a whole lot each year, but it is a significant amount. We also could be more aggressive in the bills that we send.
Well, and let me try to rephrase my question. If we had an incident in town, truck rolls over, spills diesel,
Oh, yeah.
fuel, what would be the liability cost to clean that up?
You're getting into thousands and thousands at that point. When we get that big, we ourselves are calling in an outside company, and that would be no different than Temple or Austin or anybody else. You're going to get a third-party provider that's going to come do the cleanup on that. We've had incidents in town where it's not uncommon they go down 281 and make the turn, and they'll spill something like that, and you have to bring in somebody from outside, and they'll do the chemical spill cleanup on that. We've had accidents up north of town where they've gone off on the side of the road, and TxDOT then ends up sending them a bill, calling in a third-party provider. So you're getting into multiple thousands with that, but you're usually talking about a trucking company, and they have that type of stuff. What we're typically talking about would be just providing extrication on something like that, and it would be a couple of $1,000s. When you charge for the engine company, the crew, the tools, the man hours that are out there with that, it does get up to where it's a couple of $1,000s with that. So it all depends on how many incidents we do respond to that are of that nature. But it could be a low year of $2,000, and it could be a big year of $25,000 or $30,000, just depending on exactly what's going on.
So are we concerned at this point that if we just start billing the individual, that we will have a lot of non-pays, or that we will have to use counsel to done them for us? At this point, if you just billed the individual, does
Fire Recovery USA?
Fire Recovery, do they still support you in that endeavor?
Yes, they do. I personally think that based on work experience and with that, you're going to send them a bill, and if they can pay, they will. If they feel like it's something that they can pay, they'll pay it and then turn it to their insurance company, or they'll turn it to their insurance company, and the insurance company will pay you.
Right.
So I think it's a good practice for that. It's out of the ordinary. It's out of the normal scope of what we do. I think the only time that, that we get on a little bit sketchy ground is when we say, hey, we're only billing you because you don't live here in town, or we're only billing people that are with a company that comes through or something like that.
No, I don't think you would, but so what does that become for you? What sort of hardship is that on the fire department if you then have to do all this?
It's no hardship whatsoever. I mean, we have the information. It's a matter of sending it to Fire Recovery USA or sending it to somebody and making that billing process go through. So the information is there in our report.
That'd be my recommendation, is to start billing the insured and then sending it on through USA Recovery and hopefully get what you can get and use a outside source to rebill if necessary. Does anyone else?
So, just to make sure I have this straight, so Fire Recovery USA, they will bill the individual.
Yes.
They just have not been.
They have not been because evidently the way that it's all set up, we've always had them bill the insurance company.
Okay.
And this was brought to council because I think as we talked about in that first time, when we were talking about this, what typically is going to happen is you're going to find out about it before we do, because you're going to see somebody and they're going to go, hey, I got a bill for that. Why did I get a bill for that? And we wanted y'all to make sure that y'all were aware of that and had a heads up on that and could explain that.
Is everyone good with that? Chief, are you good with that?
I'm good with that. Hopefully you're good with that. All right, thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you, sir.
Uh-huh.
Next item, discussion regarding the CIP program report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. You do have a copy of the CIP report at your seat at the dais. I do also want to acknowledge those members present, and of course, two of your own serve on that committee. Herb Pierce and Chuck Williamson, as well as Shirley Blake is here too. So we may put Shirley on the spot here in a minute for her comments, as well as Mr. Pierce and Mr. Williamson. I'm going to refer to only the narrative in this report, but I do want to point out how the report is divided. You do have a couple of the first sections that identify the authority as well as the committee's priority definitions, funding statement, and I think what we've said to you year after year, at least recently, is that we feel like a good understanding of the roles of the CIP committee versus the role of the council. And I think that understanding has helped a lot in terms of the continuity and our ability to get projects done and identified and done. The CIP committee is to identify projects, but they fully recognize throughout this document and in previous documents that ultimately, if you've got to put dollars to a project, that's ultimately council's responsibility. So you set the priorities through the budget process, or occasionally if we have a capital project come up that's not within the CIP, that's more of an emergency nature, it's the same circumstance. So council is the ultimate body that sets the priorities, funds, and implements the projects. CIP committee identifies through a number of meetings over broad topics, those specific projects, and they put them together. And a lot of times, like Mayor Pro Tem Williamson will tell you, is that we've had some projects that are on this list for 6, 7, 8 years, and they just don't ever, they're still scheduled, they're still something that's worthy of including, but they don't rise to the importance or rise to the level that council funds them. And usually that's for very good and thoughtful reasons. So just running through this, we did want to, again, I'll hit the high points of the narrative. We have met 6 times since March 3rd. We were postponed by the ice storm in February for 1 meeting. We didn't have any problems with COVID this year, and that's the first time in a couple years. We actually took, I think not last year, but year before, it seems like we took 6 months off because we didn't meet during that time period. We do also want to recognize that the committee and the work was enhanced by the addition and experience of Assistant City Manager Ryan Ward, and that Donnell Rathman was not able to attend meetings during this cycle. This is the same format we've used, frankly, over the last 9 or 10 years. We have increased the scope to include responsibilities related to planning, technology, equipment and apparatus, major maintenance, non-CIP fleet. Those are all items that are not specifically referenced in the municipal code in terms of the scope, but we felt like those items were just as important in terms of identifying future capital projects as well as maintaining of our capital assets. The report includes specifically the public facilities, which is mentioned by code, infrastructure, and capital projects. The agendas we spend a fair amount of time reviewing previous projects, and I think certainly Shirley and Herb and Chuck will tell you that in reviewing the CIP process over the years, as well as what you have funded over the years, it's pretty impressive. You think, gosh, we haven't done a lot. Seems like everything takes so much time. But if you look at our project list from 2013 versus now, we've knocked a lot of stuff off the list, and I think it's a credit to the CIP committee as well as council. We also discussed some of the emergency projects that were non-CIP identified that came up, which is, roofs and drainages that were washed out, et cetera. We talked a little bit about the potential impacts of CO funding, not only on previous projects, but on future projects. Our public facilities discussions included, and agenda items included discussion on Hostess House, Historic Colored School, Calvert Building, New Hope Baptist Church. We did also talk about some additional preventative maintenance items on the major maintenance schedule. And I think another real important point that kind of came up through this committee this year was the importance of integration of our comprehensive plan with our CIP process. And so you'll note, if you look in the CIP schedule, we've added a separate column that says, how does this project relate to the comprehensive plan? And sometimes it's not a reach, but it's not as specific as we'd want it to be. But a lot of times those objectives that are identified in the comprehensive plan are very specific to the capital projects. And I credit Neil Level with kind of making sure that was something that was integrated in our report to you, the emphasis on the comprehensive plan. On the next page, the committee also discussed items and strategies not directly related to specific CIP projects. It's just like sometimes we talk about stuff that's not directly related to a capital project, but it could have some sort of impacts or future capital needs on city or city operations. And so we talked a little bit about the internet deployment, as well as the use of ARPA funds for the business park, water and wastewater improvements, as well as potential hospitality uses of the business park, maybe for hotel and conferences. Talked a little bit about the impact of the 2024 total eclipse. The committee also discussed the need to incorporate the dark sky, night sky compliant lighting as a major maintenance item. The committee also discussed potential impacts of homeless population on city facilities and resources. There was a common thread as future growth, and particularly, as you'll see under the areas of emphasis, the potential impacts and our ability to plan and have resources available, particularly on the water side. We also talked about a number of projects that were outside of the city's scope but impacted the city. So the South 281 widening, I-14, the relief route, the Lampasas substation upgrade by LCRA. Those are not anything that we had planned, but will certainly impact our planning and our project list. The areas of emphasis, and again, these are typically, the committee has a defined set of priorities, or can attach priorities to certain projects, but it is not it's not terribly sophisticated, but it's very useful to understand. We'll rank a project as a 1 if we have to meet some sort of regulatory guideline, if we're under administrative order, if we're not in compliance on an item, that automatically moves to the top. I think public safety is also 1. A 2 is system efficiency, economic development, things that we can do to save us money in the long run. A 3 would be more cultural improvements, so your parks and recs projects and things like that. That doesn't necessarily mean that you don't fund any threes. You typically will fund a mix. It just simply says that we don't give you a 1 to 10 where everybody thinks their project is most important and rank it at number 1. Again, ultimately, that's up to council. But we do come up with in our narrative, kind of an areas of emphasis, and those are typically things that have floated to the top in terms of our discussion. Last year, it was public safety communications. The year before that, internet was one of the 3 or 4 things. And typically, council, in turn, has given those items more attention when it comes to the budget process. So I think just the areas that we tended to float to the top in terms of our discussions was water system planning, long-range planning for future needs, and in particular, the need to maintain water reservations, which council has done, and we've certainly looked at through the upper pressure plane study, which has actually turned into a full-blown future water needs study. Need to manage future growth, and we're talking about utilities, public safety, transportation. Not a specific project, but this is something that was important to the committee. I think the committee also felt community improvements, including the hostess house, trails and connectivity, wayfinding, and gateway signage was also something that was important for the city to continue to look at. Former Councilman McCauley felt strongly about investment in technology, making sure that we stay up to date in terms of how we can use technology for the benefit of the city and city resources, public safety, utility management, security, GIS, data collection. The need to align city planning with the comprehensive plan objectives, support of public safety, and also support of the WCID in its efforts when and if the legislature will pony up to upgrade some of their dams to high hazard, which, as we know, will be somewhere in the order of a $75,000 to $175,000 local match on a $6 to $12 million project. I just hit the highlights on what we talked about in terms of public facilities, and we did highlight some things that we had taken on: the park pavilion, the planning for the rehab and expansion of the hostess house, the addition of the New Hope Baptist Church. Other public facility discussion included complementary uses and assessment of New Hope Baptist Church, historic colored school, and then also the possibility of assessing private use by a lease or some sort of partnership, perhaps, with the future use of that property. Hostess house, future growth in terms of public facilities related to a fire department substation, final touches to the Calvert building, including exterior upgrades, improvements, and improvements to the basement, some city hall improvements, exterior improvements to the water, wastewater shop and lab, permanent fencing at Hannah Spring, Campbell Park Pavilion, and Campbell Park Skate Park facility security. Those are some items that we discussed in the public facilities section. The CIP, which is really kind of the meat and potatoes of your report, is they have identified 88 different projects to meet the needs of the city over the next 5 years. They're not always traditionally brick and mortar projects. We've included planning projects in this. For example, the sewer interceptor study. That is something that's included in the CIP because we know that the byproduct of that study may be a capital project. So that's something that we have included. The business park also, that's a huge part of the CIP project. Water looping, improvements to the sewer plant, upgrades to the cemetery, including the utility barn, roadway improvements and erosion control, zoning regulation updates, master plan for the parks, airport terminal area plan, and Eclipse public safety plan. Fleet forecast and major maintenance. I think major maintenance, we've certainly seen the benefits of that. We've also taken a step further on major maintenance through the implementation of the Pazer Street rating program that Ryan's been telling you about over the last couple of meetings. We'll be able to improve more blocks under that type of process and that planning for a extended life cycle of those roads than probably we've done more comprehensively than we have in a number of years. So That was a great portion in terms of our major maintenance. That will, the end result will be savings of dollars and extension of life on our roads. We also, acknowledge things like our pole inspection, tree trimming process, that make our utilities more reliable. We're not getting the 3 or 4 hour outages. Where tree branch might hit a line, we may have to throw a fuse back in, but typically we're up and going in a relatively short period of time. Fleet replacement, just over the next 5 years, we're looking to replace 7 police cars, 3 fire and utility apparatus, and 7 pickups. And I think the other thing that we heard from the committee at the end of our most recent meeting was that they do acknowledge the positive relationship between the committee and council. They feel like the report is useful, that council listens to the report once it's put together, and the track record speaks for itself. If something is important to the committee, it's probably going to be important to the council, and ultimately council will provide resources for that project. I'm going to step aside and ask Shirley and Mayor Pro Tem Williamson and Council Member Pierce just for any additional things that I may have missed or any other comments related to the process. You will have a corresponding item on the regular agenda to acknowledge receipt of the report as well.
Thank you, Finley. I think that there's 2 areas, and Finley mentioned both of them, but I'd like for the council to take a special emphasis in reading the areas of Memphis. We have looked through that, and that is not a prioritization. That's just issues, projects that we came up with.
Talking to this, right?
Sorry, okay. That we came up with. I was trying to watch it at the same time. But doing that, I think is as important as anything is this benefits the council, this report, and it's very thorough. Finley did a great job, sorry again, but of being able to move forward with the comprehensive plan. That thing has kind of stagnated due to just other things coming up that have moved it to the side. But I, for one, think this is documented will be very beneficial for us in being able to answer some of those questions very rapidly. Shirley?
Well, I kind of want to reiterate what both of these gentlemen have said. Been on this thing for many years, and there have been many council meetings where I have seen the council members, where I've seen council members look at it, flip through it, and say, not interested. And so we really appreciate the last few years where council has looked at it and they've actually gone over it and worked on an awful lot of the subjects that we've had on there. So we really appreciate that. And we have covered amazing amount of stuff. Many meetings and amazing amount. It only sounds 6 meetings, but let me tell you, they were in depth, and so we just appreciate all of your work and listening to it, and hopefully you'll fund some of this stuff.
Thank you, Shirley.
And I would also agree with Chuck, and I believe that Finley has identified each, and maybe not everything, but I think the highlights of where we're headed and where we need to be going. It's certainly given me a great overview for when I come back and I sit in here and knowing that the CIP is identifying these issues, and then to begin to look and see where our finances are and where they're going to come from. And I applaud Finley for the hard work, and also Ryan. That was a great discussion on what do you call it, on our roads, the RACER program? Pacer program. I mean, that was a first for me, that I'd never heard that, and that kind of goes along with our comprehensive planning of looking out 3, 4, 5, 10, 15 years of where we're going to go, and identifying the money that it's going to take to get there. I think that helped me more than anything. Instead of just going in and tearing up roads and replace them, it gives us an opportunity to plan for this, and also, begin looking at staff compensation and different things like that. As I know that's a little bit different on here, but anyway, I commend you guys.
Anything else? We do appreciate all the effort that's gone into this report, and as everyone says, we do look at it. We tend to use it as a Bible, so thanks again for all your help.
Can I make one more comment?
Sure.
Also, I think the fire truck that the city just bought, that was something that came out of the CIP meeting that we had several discussions over several months. And it just gave a rhyme and a reason to be able for us to come back and approve what Chief Smith brought us through all that.
Right. Anything else? Next item up is discussion regarding any item on the regular agenda. Does anyone wish to discuss anything on the agenda? Do we need a break? We'll just soldier on through then. We'll go adjourn the workshop session with a motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We'll go straight into the regular session, and we will call to order. And Chief Jody, is he still here? There he is.
Jody's here.
Yeah.
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this great evening and this great facility. We thank you for all of the people here tonight, our elected officials, our staff, and our citizens. We pray for open communication, and we pray for good communication, and we pray for good decisions that will help all of us as a whole, your people. We want to ask that you be with those in less fortunate places in our world tonight, and please bring safety and peace to those places that need it so dearly right now. We'd like to say a special prayer for some of these rain clouds around us, and if you could see fit to drop a little on us, we'd sure appreciate it. We'd like to ask that you forgive us of our sins, and that you be with us in safety as we travel home and until we can meet again. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me in the pledges. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one indivisible.
We do have some presentations tonight. Is anybody here? Warren Spivey is here for a 10-year presentation. Next item is citizen comments. Anyone who desires to address the city council on a matter that is not included may do so at this time. The city council may not deliberate on any item presented under this agenda item. Scott Powell. Thank you for coming, and I will just say again, whatever you're going to talk about, we can't respond to you, so we're not being rude, we just can't respond.
I've got the procedure.
Okay?
Thank you. And thank you, Mayor, Councilman, and citizens here in the area. I'm Scott Powell. I just wanted to take a minute and introduce myself. Y'all have seen a lot of my advertising in the newspaper, in the Dispatch here of lately. I am running for the Pedernales Electric Cooperative Board of Directors, and there are part of the District 5 that I'm running for that's up in this area. I'm out of Horseshoe Bay, and it's important that I get out and allow you to put a face with the name that you've been seeing around. And that's the whole purpose of just taking a couple of minutes of your time today. And so I greatly appreciate it. And voting did start this week, and we appreciate any of the support. There's 278 registered PEC members that are Lampasas, and 3 years ago, 78 of them voted. So my goal is to try and get some numbers up. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next item is citizen comments. Any citizen who desires to address the city council on a matter that is included on the agenda may do so. Does anyone wish to speak on the agenda? Next item, 2.1 minutes. Discussion and possible action concerning the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting on May 9th, 2022.
I didn't see any corrections. Recommend approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Discussion and possible action concerning the approval of minutes of the special meeting held on May 16th, 2022.
Again, I didn't see any corrections. Recommend approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Next item, discussion and possible action concerning the approval of minutes of the City Council work session held on May 19th, 2022.
Again, I didn't see any discrepancy. Recommend approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I abstain.
Okay. We have no consent agenda. Next item up is the library monthly report.
Mayor, council, good evening. Christy, are you going to be doing this? Okay, thank you. In your packet, you have my report from April, but I actually want to give you an update over what has gone on in the last year. So. No, next one. That one, okay. Well, pretty sensitive. So first of all, we do have 5 staff altogether. These are 4 of my people. As you can see, we have some fun at the library from a couple of these pictures. We're actually losing one pretty soon. Here we go. It's it's not working quite like I planned, but, okay. Our physical collection includes over 27,000 items. I do try to keep up with the new titles, the new releases coming out. So currently, we have 2,323 items with a copyright of 2020 or newer. To help put this in perspective, for our state annual report, we're only required to have 1% of our collection be published within the last 5 years. We have over 22% of our collection is published within the last 5 years. So we're way ahead of that. So try to keep on top of it. We have gotten some compliments from people on how quickly we get new releases out. I guess they go to various libraries and they see that we get ours out pretty quickly. So I'm proud of that. Next. So just a couple of more numbers before we get to the fun stuff. Circulation was up. You know, we're still dealing with, still dealing with COVID a little bit, but from May 21 to April 22, circulation was up 26.4%. And in that same period of time, door count, which is the number of people through the doors, was up 74.8%. Starting in, I think it was about March of 2021, I think people started feeling more comfortable getting out, so they started coming in, browsing more, starting about that time. Okay, next. So I've listed some of the programs that we have had within the last year. We did have summer reading. We had one program a week in June. We weren't sure what to expect as far as attendance, and so we just did one program a week, and we held them outdoors to allow for social distancing. The picture on the top left is of the mobile dairy that we had come out. There's a pretty good attendance for all of our programs. We also had a petting zoo. Some FFA kids came out with their animals, and then Casey came and talked about the animal shelter. So the bottom left photo is from the stuffed animal sleepover. And for those of you that don't know what this program is, these kids, we limit it to 15. They bring their stuffed animals to the library. The stuffed animals stay at the library overnight, get into all kind of mischief. In this particular picture, you can see them invading the staff lockers. They've gotten into the vending machine, in the book drop. They get on the computers. They make copies of themselves on the copier. Anyway, so then the next day, the kids come back, pick up their stuffed animals, get a booklet that has pictures of their animals getting into all kinds of trouble. And the kids really get a kick out of it, seeing what their stuffed animal did. So their smiles make it all worth the trouble. Then in February of this year, we had a library-wide escape room, which was very popular. We had groups of about 8 to 10, ages 7 and up. They had an hour to solve these clues and escape the library before the doors were locked forever. So we had good attendance. We did have to cancel a couple of them due to weather, but everybody seemed to enjoy it, and we'll be doing another one, I'm sure. We also have quite a bit of interest in our STEAM days. These are for 7 to 11-year-olds, and the image on the bottom right is an example of one of those. It's Lego robotics, and this particular one is called Earthquake. And those 3 little pieces, they're houses. They're put on that flat base there on the left, and then the motor on the other end makes that shake, and the kids see which ones fall first and which ones last the longest, and then they get to talk about why. So that's just an example of one of the STEAM programs that we've done. Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. We went live in August of 2021. We, as some of you may not know, we received a very generous donation to get us started on this program. And basically, it's a free book for kids under the age of 5. So every month, they get a free book addressed to them, and it's a brand new hardback, age-appropriate book sent to them every month. When Judy Lansford and I met with Dr. Rasco, and he was beyond excited, and by the time we got back to the library, he had already made a Facebook post, and so I already had like over 100 waiting for me to sign up. So we registered over 100 kids in just a few days, and we thought it would take a year for us to get there, so thank you, Dr. Rasco. So right now, about 8 months in, we have registered 586 children altogether. So we have the 474 active and 112 that have graduated, meaning they turned 5 years old. Each month we send out about 500 books, which means we're going through that money quickly. But we're not complaining, but we do need to continue with our fundraising. We did, besides the original donation, we have gotten some of the Guthrie funds designated for this, and we've received some donations from individuals. So for just $25, you can sponsor a child for 1 year. That's nothing. For one child to get 12 books. So, and your donation is tax deductible. If you're interested, let me know. Okay, next. The Echo sculpture is kind of the icing on the cake for our library park. It was installed on February 14th, just days before our park dedication. I was getting kind of nervous there. I'm like, is it gonna be here? You can go ahead and go to the next one. If you attended the park dedication, thank you. We appreciate your support. You probably remember it was very crowded because we had to move the program inside because of the weather, but it turned out to be a great event nonetheless. The foundation worked tirelessly on this project. You know, it looks, you think it just happens, but there's a lot of work that goes into something like this, which some of us know. But the final product is a beautiful park that's a great asset not only to the neighborhood, but also to the city as a whole. There are so many that donated to this park, and on the back side of the sign there's plaques thanking all of the donors. And it's really nice to see families out there using this. So we thank the Parks Department for maintaining it for us. Okay, next. Another component of the park dedication event was the painted chair fundraiser. We auctioned off 8 chairs that day. You'll see there are 9 posted here. The Grinch stool was auctioned off in December. But we did raise a total of $1,700 for children's programs. And we couldn't do that without the artists as well as those who bought the chairs. So I do want to point out that the Grinch chair and the Charlotte's Web chair next to it were painted by Catherine Mesger, who will be missed by so many in this community. Okay, next. Video streaming. This service was also made possible by donation. So, do you see a theme here? We have DVDs at the library, of course, that people can check out, but we're in an on-demand time. Everybody's watching streaming. And so in thinking about that and the library, you know, we felt like there was a service gap. Well, then this opportunity came up, and we feel like that filled that gap. We're able to offer video on demand for children and adults. All you need is a library card, And some of the producers that are included are HBO, A&E, PBS, History Channel, Nat Geo, and then for kids, we've got Sesame Street, Electric Company, Reading Rainbow, Jim Henson, and more. Currently, we've got over 42,000 titles for adults and almost 12,000 for kids. In our Trail of Tales, first of all, I need to thank Kathy, who's not here. She took some of these pictures for me. But the LCRA volunteers installed the all 17 pedestals on April 1st. And then a few weeks later, we did get the first story installed with the help of the Parks Department again. The wind made it a little challenging that day, but we made it.
Shanda, may I ask how long each story stays out there?
It just depends. We thought this one might stay out there longer, but we're actually looking at changing this one out for one that goes more along with our summer reading theme. So we'll probably be changing that pretty soon. Okay, next. But I do want to thank Chris Eicher for all of his help in getting that whole project going, because he contacted Chris Oldham and all of that, so he did a lot of the work. I appreciate his help. So speaking of summer reading, we're just about a week away from that, and we're glad to be back to our normal schedule, pre-COVID schedule. We'll have programs on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays for the kids, and then on Tuesdays for the teens. Some of the kids' programs will be stories, crafts. We're going to have activities at each of the parks, Brook Park, Campbell Park, Cooper Spring, and 580 Sports Complex. In fact, we're going to have a field day out at 580, so it should be fun. And then we'll be having a Taekwondo demonstration, and there's also a rumor that there might be some snakes and lizards visiting, so not really looking forward to that. The teen programs will include Bird Watching 101, Eclipses 101, Cartooning 101, and Survival 101. The cartooning one is actually a cartooning workshop, so there'll be an instructor, and the kids will, or the teens, will get to draw themselves. And the Explore Lampasas, I know I'm taking up a lot of time. Explore Lampasas is a new 11-month long program that will be starting in July. We're going to be utilizing some local experts for some of these programs. You can see some of the topics we're going to be covering. Included in the packets that will be sent home with the kids will be one project that they have to complete and turn into the library. And we're going to have those on display at the library each month. And they have to turn that in to get their badge for the month. And this program will be for kids ages 5 to 13. The younger kids will have easier projects, and the older kids will have a little bit harder ones. And then finally, barbecue for books. I wanted to sneak that in since we haven't done it in a while. We've missed having it, but we're going to do it this year, so mark your calendars. Any questions?
Anyone have any questions for Shanda? Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Routine matters. Next item is City Manager's operational report.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just a few brief comments. The report is included in your packet. I do want to reference TxDOT public hearing in Lampasas, May 18th. We did take the opportunity to hear from Brownwood District representatives regarding county as well as district projects. You do have the handouts or selected handouts from that hearing in your packet, so please feel free to take a look at those. I think in addition to the South 281 improvement project and widening project, Another item of interest for the city of Lampasas that personally I wasn't aware of was the scheduling of the 3rd Street bridge replacement at Burleson Creek. That is tentatively scheduled for 2024. In addition to those projects and other district projects, they also discussed the I-14 construction project, particularly as it's going through Copperas Cove, and that is going to come in and have an exchange in Lampasas County right around Big Divide. So it'll be a flyover over the Briggs Road and then come in and land in Big Divide Road. So they are making steps to extend I-14 now from Colleen and Cove as it comes into the east side of Cove to the east side of Lampasas County. We do want to also mention the fact that this is something that is a tentative date and that has not been advertised for a public meeting on the relief route around Lampasas. It looks like they're targeting the end of June for that. As council may recall, you approved a letter of support for them conducting a feasibility study for a relief route. That also dovetails into one of the items that was expressed as a need through the comprehensive planning process. What do we do about the truck traffic in and through Lampasas? This is certainly one way to address that. So that should be in the works here. Hopefully they'll advertise that here in the next week or two for the end of June, if not sometime this summer. Wanted to provide a little update on the business park, Phase 1 construction. They have hit a little bit more rock than what they thought, but they continue to make good progress, and by our staff on the ground, that they assess that they remain between 20 and 30 days ahead of schedule. They're continuing to compact and make lifts on the subgrade, but only really particularly in that area where there's a tie-in to South 183. The sewer line is about 60% complete, which they've made great progress on, although they've hit some rock, like I said, particularly on the east side of the east-west road in the vicinity of 183. But that should be nearing completion here in the next week or two, and they should be installing storm drains sometime next week. We have approved pay application number 1. It's been processed for $483,000, of which about $48,000 has been retained. And of the $434,000 that's been paid, $245,000 was paid from ARPA funds for water and wastewater improvements. And you do have a copy of the cover page for that pay request. And certainly again, we'd invite you out there, just let Ryan or Mandy know, and they'll be happy to find a city truck that'll bounce you around out there if you like. And certainly if there's any other information I can provide, I know there was Councilmember Morrison, hopefully this gets you the information you need, but I'd certainly be happy to gather whatever else we could for you. On sales tax, again, we're up through the month of May compared to May a year ago. We're about a 5.36% increase. Not quite the double-digit increases that we have been seeing, but good nevertheless year to date. We're still about 12% ahead of where we were at this time last year. And then the other thing we want to do is we also want to put it in perspective of our budget. And we have collected about $1.5 million on an annual plan of $1.9 million, which is about 78% of our plan. And that is through basically 66% of the year. So that's the simple math on it. So we're ahead not only in actuals, but we're ahead according to what we planned for through our budget process. Avenue C, we're about 50 or 60% complete on that project, and that was to replace about 3,300 linear feet of sewer line and related connections. We do have a manhole to place at Race with related tie-ins, and in finishing up the extension to Key. They have also encountered a little rock, particularly on the west side of that project. Kidfish, Chris Eicher, that reports that event has been scheduled for June 3rd and 4th. This is, when you talk about the library and the great things going on at the library, we don't want to overlook the other great things that are going on in our park either, right? We've got Kidfish program that typically attracts well over 100 participants, depending on the weather, and that's a combination of movie, meal, camping as well as fishing the next day. So great program, and they do a great job with it. A pool schedule, we've included that in your packet because inevitably somebody's going to know you're on council and say, hey, when do the pools open? So now you know, and it looks like Labor Day weekend, the 28th. Just as a reminder, Hannah normally closes Sunday and Monday, and Hancock normally closes Monday through Wednesday. Budget, although we have not really thrown a lot of stuff at council yet, I wanted to let you know that staff is working on year-end projections. We will typically do that, and then shortly after the CIP process, we'll start working with council on your goals and priorities in preparation of an initial plan. We typically have done a budget rollout at the last meeting in June, and probably really more often than not, it's that first meeting in July we'll do a rollout. But again, we want to start visiting with you about your goals and priorities sooner rather than later, particularly now that the CIP process is kind of out of the way. We do want to recognize those employees who began their City of Lampasas careers in May. Francisco Palacios, 5 years. Marissa Smith, 3 years. Rodney Kepler, 3 years. Tony Barrio, 20 years. Warren Spivey, also known as Junior, 10 years. Jonathan Guerra, 4 years. Colton Baker, 7 years. Josh Straley, 15 years. Danica Keeling, 4 years. Esther Ramirez, 4 years. Kyle Moulter, 1 year. Marcel Chapa, 12 years. Cody Kepler, 4 years. And Patricia Eicher, 6 years. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Finally, going back to the business part, we're seeing here pay application number 1 has been processed for $483,200.
Yes.
Talking about that retainage there. You're saying that $245,499.80 was paid from the recovery relief funds. Is that what you're saying there?
Correct.
Where did the rest come from of that?
LEDC funds.
Okay, cool. And that's just the 245 was out of that 970?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I didn't know if it was coming out of another fund or
Yeah,
if it was
and so the
EDC.
other thing you can look at, we'll continue to give you those pay application covers. The other thing to look for is that 35, that coding at the end of it is 35, and then 2 numbers and then 4 numbers. That 35 is Fund 35, which is the ARPA funds. And the other one is 22 or 75. And then the other one starts with a 75, that's LEDC.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
Any other questions for Finley? Thank you, sir. We have no mayor comments today. We have no unfinished business. New business. 7.1, discussion and possible action regarding the support of TxDOT project for improvements to the Lampasas Municipal Airport by resolution in the amount of $20,000 as the project cost share for the city.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I do want to recognize those members of the Airport Advisory Board and the Pilots Association that are in attendance, and I would certainly, after my comments, without objection from you, Mayor, would allow them to chime in on this project. This project is identified not only through the CIP process, but also through a joint meeting that you had with the Airport Advisory Board several months ago. This project, as we have reported to Council, is going to the Transportation Commission in June, and the project is, the scope will be much more eloquently put by TxDOT staff, but it's basically what you're doing is a comprehensive plan for the airport. So one of the things that came out of our meeting with the Airport Advisory Board is we need this, but we don't know where to put it, or we don't know how this could affect future use, and this will provide us with a plan forward for the airport and the identification of those areas, those spaces, and what future resources we may need out there. This is estimated at a $200,000 project, of which the city is required to pay 10% of that match. It's the best deal in grant funds out there for anything that I've ever seen in terms of utilities or parks or other municipal funding sources. The resolution, just to hit the high notes on that, basically you will have the opportunity to designate the city manager to select 5 individuals as members of a consultant selection committee. That's typically going to be a mix of people from Airport Board or Airport Advisory Committee or Pilots Association, one or two people perhaps from city council, and then maybe one staff person as well that would help assess the proposals that are submitted. It also identifies that we will be responsible for 10% of that funding, which is $20,000. As council may recall in my finance report of May 9th, because our previous airport project came in under TxDOT's estimate, we actually got a reimbursement of some of our match. So I think you recall me saying that, hey, we're flush on revenue at the airport because we did get that reimbursement. That was actually a 2016 project that we finally got reimbursed this fiscal year on. So we have the money to pay the $20,000, I guess is what I'm saying, from the airport. It also identifies TxDOT as the agent for the program. They will do all the contracting, they will do all the administration, et cetera. And you also, through this resolution, would direct as your sponsor representative the position of city manager. I think the other thing, kind of the questions that may come up is, what's the time schedule on this? And I think the TxDOT rough schedule is to, this resolution needs to get to them for the commission consideration. They will typically work through the summer on scoping the project and getting ready to send out RFQs, which would be in August. They will receive them back hopefully within 30 to 45 days and then submit them to the sponsor for review and selection on or around October. And then they would notify the consultants of the results on or around October, November 2022. So it's something that seems like a long time between now and October, but that's the typical time frame. I'd be happy to answer any questions, or also, Mayor, if you'd like, if there are any comments from those members of the Airport Board or the Pilots Association that would want to make comment.
Sure. Before we make a motion, we would ask if either of you want to speak.
I'm George Elsey.
Right?
I'm president of the Lampasas Pilot Association, also a member of the Airport Advisory Board. What you're looking at today is the beginning that we need to make necessary improvements, and they've been necessary for a good number of years. So I strongly encourage you to vote in favor of this, just to get the ball rolling. We're looking forward to it. Thanks very much.
Thank you, sir.
The Airport Improvement Program is designed to look at some of the problems that we have now and those that are associated with the growth that we see. There are demands for such things as hangar space. We've got somewhere around 28 people in a line waiting for hangars. We don't know where we can build them. We need the master plan to give us the smartest way to do that.
Right.
We've also had a requirement for a terminal building for Lampasas. We really don't have one right now. We have what's called a pilot's lounge, and some of our visitors have considered it to be the Lampasas outhouse. There's no place to sit down and plan a flight. There's no place to sit down as an instructor and talk to a student on what they're going to do on a flight. These things are just done in hangars or standing around in the heat. They really need, for operational purposes at the airport, we need a facility that will allow those kinds of things to go on. Also, it should be a place where people can consider it a terminal, airport terminal, increasingly important as we get more business and more business traffic into Lampasas. And we're looking for that in a lot of different areas. But the improvements with extending the runway, getting better hangar facilities, getting better places to park airplanes, and to get the facilities around the area of a terminal to make this an important stop for business and, of course, use for the local people. Any specific questions?
Are you
There needs to be a motion before we're asking the questions.
Go ahead.
There needs to be a motion before we can. Okay. Can I just go ahead and make a motion on here? Sure. I move to approve the resolution of the City of Lampasas City Council stating support and acceptance of the proposed aviation capital improvement program at the Lampasas Municipal Airport.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. We'll now open up again for questions.
Are you also open for private investment on the hangars as well?
I don't know what the private investment opportunities will be. Finley? Chris? Answer to that one?
We've had lots of people contact us wanting to do the land lease programs where it's typically a 25-year lease, and then it reverts back to the city at that point where it becomes your property, is how that usually works.
Okay.
But in short, yes.
Any other questions or comments or concerns? Thank you, sir, for your time. Appreciate it. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Seven point two, discussion and possible action regarding the fire department incident reporting and billing.
Good evening again, Mayor and Council. On November 22nd, 2021, the Lampasas Fire Department requested guidance from City Council on whether to begin billing individuals for services provided by the Lampasas Fire Department as it pertains to motor vehicle accidents. As a follow-up, on May 9th, 2022, discussion of this item has been placed on the agenda for further discussion and review. The billing company that is used, Fire Recovery USA, has advised the insurance providers are increasingly refusing to pay invoices that are sent directly to the provider. Their advice was to begin billing the insured individual for services and have the individual for the invoice to the insurance provider. The Lampasas Fire Department does recover around $7,000 annually for these types of responses. Staff is requesting guidance on whether to begin billing for services provided on these types of incidents. Staff will need to begin billing or cancel the account with Fire Recovery USA.
I'd consider a motion.
I'll make a motion to consider billing the insured individual directly or to cancel the account with Fire Recovery USA and not recover the cost for the service provided at a motor vehicle accident.
So I think we want to have the motion just to begin billing the insured individual directly? Is that what?
Yes.
Okay.
Second.
To consider billing the insured individual directly.
Yes, I have a second.
So I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
7.3, discussion and acknowledgement of the 2023 through 2028 CIP report.
Make a motion to acknowledge the submission of the CIP report for 2023-2028.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Are there any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 7.4, discussion and possible action regarding the first reading to adopt an ordinance amending Appendix A of the City of Lampasas, Texas Code of Ordinances, Chapter 62, Solid Waste, Article 3, Billing Rates and Fees Related to the Collection of Solid Waste, providing for severability and repealer clauses, and providing an effective date.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is an annual increase from Waste Connections as allowed by their contract to ask for an annual increase according to the Consumer Price Index. This year, it is an 8.81% increase.
Make a motion to adopt the ordinance to implement new rates set by contract with Waste Connections.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Do we have any questions for Yvonne?
Yvonne, on page 71, what is the breakdown of these numbers? Like, what do those mean?
This is the CPI that's, this one, this is provided by Waste Connections to show what the Consumer Price Index is, and what they're asking for is 8.81%. This just shows the CPI from them.
Councilman Morris, if I can maybe further explain, the
You don't mind.
CPI, so if you take April 2022, 279, basically $279 versus April of 2021, 257, that's where you get the delta, and you get the 8.81%. What is CPI? Probably the easiest analogy is it's a grocery basket, right? It's a little of this, it's the price for this that's gone up, it's the price for this that's gone up. The one thing that a lot of times it does not include is diesel, and sometimes there'll be escalator costs related specifically to diesel if you have a CPI multiplier in a contract. The other question that councils will ask sometime is, well, why don't we just do a fixed rate contract over the term? And typically what you have to do then is be prepared to pay for that hedge from the company's cost. So a lot of times they will have to increase their costs over the term of that contract to hedge for any increases in CPI. Now in this case, we wouldn't normally see an 8.81% increase in CPI. I mean, in fact, I was just looking at the Austin Business Journal, and that's what it is, 8.87. You also have different baskets of CPI too. So it could be a Houston CPI basket. It could be a Dallas Metro or all urban customer CPI basket of goods and services. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's basically inflation. It's what the cost of everything is going up.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Thank you.
Thanks. 7.5. Discussion and possible action to seek proposals for the skate park pad at Campbell Park.
Good afternoon again, Mayor, Council. As discussed with the consultants for the skate park, it's recommended that we go ahead and focus on mobilization of materials and how we reduce those costs for the skate park. So as we discussed in the workshop session, one of the things that we wanted to vet and look into was getting some of the costs down for the pad. We know there's some material geotech issues with the soil out there. We've already run into that with the pavilion, so there's a need to remove. It was about 4 feet deep on the pavilion and put in base material or an improved material and then compact it and bring that back up for the skate park. So the intent was to meet with one of the contractors, hopefully this week, look at the site, get some feedback, because as we've noted before, the cost of materials are going up, the cost for fuel is going up, the way inflation has impacted the project has increased the project dollars needed to complete this project. So the city would like to be advantageous and look at bringing the material ourselves, purchasing that, and working with the contractor that will do the pad to cut some of those costs. So the intent is to pre-purchase the materials and stockpile. Whether that's our intent right now is to order that base material or that select fill material, have it either at our yard or, depending on the time frame and if council would like to go forward on the pad in this instance, possibly scheduling it with the company to take it to the site. Most likely, it would be taken to our public works yard and stockpiled there, depending on what the availability is on the material and when we could get that purchased. But the real intent is to cut cost, and the sooner we can purchase the material, and then cut down on the hauling cost. All those things are passed along to the city, so we're looking at a way to reduce the skate park pad. Are there any questions?
I might just add a couple of other things. So, again, as we brainstorm ways to get that $70,000 or $75,000 contractor's cost down, one of the issues is the price of materials as well as the price of transport. Our thought, and again, rough numbers, 1,000 ton?
Right, maybe just right under that.
So right now, the price for 1,000 tons delivered is $12 a ton. And that has fluctuated somewhat. If we can, and by the way, this is materials that we use for a pad for a pavilion or a pad for a skate park or a pad for a road. I mean, this is materials that will be used regardless of what happens in the future. But get a sufficient enough supply and then also mitigate some of those hauling costs. Because if we're just hauling from the city yard to Campbell Park, that's something we can use forced labor for, city force labor for. So we've got two 12-yard dumps in our fleet plus a couple of 6-yards. It's not going to take us a whole lot to get materials to that site, particularly if they're just coming from Brown Street and we know ahead of time that, hey, we're going to have to run loads over there. So we think we can mitigate it by getting the material at our cost to the site for the contractor, so the expense then becomes the hole in the compaction. We think it makes sense. And in the event, like I reminded council in workshop, in the event cement goes through the roof and now we've got our costs, are untenable, then this is stuff that's always going to be needed for our street department, and we can journal those costs back over. But anyway, that was our brainstorm after Thursday, in between the time I went to bed Thursday night after our meeting to the time I woke up the next morning, is how do we cut that $70,000 down? So,
Do you have a hauler already identified to bring that to you, that you've gotten some quotes for?
it would be hauled by the mine, by the quarry.
Okay.
Well, you're using Porter, I guess, for that? Okay.
To help put this thing to bed, I'm going to make a motion to direct staff to seek proposals for skate park pad at Campbell Park.
I have a motion.
A second.
I have a motion and a second. Are there any other questions or concerns?
Oh, this is just for materials only? This is
I was
not hiring the
going to
contractor?
acknowledge what we had heard from council on the dais, is that basically we're going to pre-purchase materials for this, yes.
Okay, so it's not a contractor, it's just materials only? Thank you.
So we could potentially let that motion die and make another motion to approve staff. I mean, we could do that, to go ahead and approve the purchase here.
You can, but you would have to deal with
Let's
the
wait.
motion that's on the
Exactly,
table
absolutely.
first.
Okay.
Okay, are there any other questions concerning this motion that we have? I have a motion and a second to direct staff to seek proposals for the skate park pad. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
So we have a majority for this proposal. Are we good?
Staff's understanding is yes, based on the discussion at the dais, the motion will be inclusive of us going out and buying materials.
And Chris has stood up. Is that, you wish to add something?
And what was yours again, Zach?
So,
I didn't understand.
so the motion that passed was to allow staff to bid this out. I mean,
Get a proposal.
right, but we have a proposal right now, essentially.
the materials just for the. Do you need to clarify this, Finley?
My vote was for the materials.
Right.
Purchase, correct?
I think that's what we all,
Council may wish to have a clarifying motion.
okay. Would you like to make that?
So I'd move to approve staff purchasing 1,000 tons of fill material, which we believe is at the price of $12 a ton. And that could be stored for either the skate park or other projects down the road.
So you're going to limit the purchase to 1,000 tons?
You need a second? Second.
Have a motion for 1,000 tons and a second. Are there any questions concerning this? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
Seven point six, discussion and possible action to direct staff to purchase fencing material and award bid for installation to contractor in the amount not to exceed $40,000.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So this is a project that we've seen multiple times on the agenda. We've been working pretty diligently with the Heritage Foundation since August of 2020 to try to get this project rolling. Council agreed to a $40,000 price tag, or budgeting $40,000 for this project. However, with the removal of the rock wall, that's going to be outside that scope. So we're recommending that we go ahead and at least purchase the materials for the fencing to go around this spring now. I would like to go ahead and install the spring, but I think that the Heritage Foundation has some things that they would like to add to that.
Maybe the third time I've talked to you all about the Hannah Springs. I'm Boyce Cavanis, and I'm the president of the it's not really the Heritage, Lampasas Heritage. I'm the president of the Lampasas County Museum. I'm the past president and current board member of LAFTA, and sit on the Lampasas County Historical Commission. And Claudia Wallace is here, who is the chair of the Lampasas County Historical Commission, and Wayne and Sherry Boltinghouse, who both sit on the commission, and Sherry also sits on the museum board with me. Last fall, when we got word that the city wanted to do something with Hannah Springs, we kind of all got together and supported a proposal to take Hannah Springs back to the way it looked in the 19th century, when it was the center of life in Lampasas. In fact, it's hard to overstate the importance of Hannah Springs to the history of Lampasas. Without Hannah Springs, Lampasas wouldn't exist. In one of the earliest maps, one of the first permanent buildings in Lampasas were built to house people that came to take the waters in the springs. George and Elizabeth Scott built them. And John Hanna bought the springs that were still just a bog with the springs in the middle. In the early 1870s, built a low containment wall around them so that they formed the pool that you see now. And that's the way they looked throughout the 19th into the 20th century, when people came from all over to take the waters. Then later on, into the 20th century, when the springs were really no longer used anymore, the Campbells built the wall around, the stone wall you see around them now, to keep debris from being washed into them during floods. So the wall you see now is not historic. So our proposal was to remove the wall and put a wrought iron fence around the containment wall to keep people out, mostly keep children out. I did a big dog and pony show with all kinds of old photos. There's lots of old photo postcards because Hannah Springs was so important. I've got just a few Xeroxes of that if you want to pass them around and see what it used to look like. Hold on a second. wall is removed and the wrought iron fence is put up. So last fall, if I owned the Hannah Springs and was gonna have this work done, I would hire Juan Vidal. He did the stone, he's an expert at historic stonework. He repaired the stonework around my 1886 house. He's done all the stonework around the Keystone Hotel. Right now, he's working on an 1870 house out on a county road that goes off 190 just east of town. He's an expert on old masonry. He's meticulous, he's careful, he knows what he's doing. I would hire him, and he has given us a quote of $9,500 to remove the stone wall. He said he could do it in 4 days and without any rock falling into the springs themselves. But the problem is he does not have the necessary insurance to be a city contractor. So the last time I spoke to you, I told you that we were going to get insurance for him so he could put in a bid. We worked for more than a week with 3 different insurance brokers. The cheapest we found was at least $5,000. So $5,000 in insurance for a $9,500 project didn't make a lot of sense. So Plan B was to find a contractor that would bid the $9,500 plus whatever the contractor fee was, and then hire Juan as a subcontractor to do the work, so Juan would be covered under the contractor's insurance. And Juan found 2 contractors who are willing to do this, and I talked to one of them, A1 Fencing in Killeen. We went with them because they were going to bid both aspects of the project, both removing the wall and putting in the wrought iron fence. And it seemed like that was all in place and everything. But then Chris called me last Thursday, and that was the last day of bids, and said A1 hadn't put in a bid. He knew they were supposed to, so he called them. And the guy we had talked to was on vacation in Louisiana and kind of just didn't bid. So Juan called the second contractor on Friday. He was willing to bid, but I think just ran out of time because the bidding was over on Thursday, and Chris and Ryan and Finley have been very, very patient and understanding. They extended bids through today, but we didn't get a bid. So building the fence without taking the wall down would be the worst case scenario for all of us. It would mean the wall would be, because the wall cannot be taken down once the fence is up. So that'd be the worst case scenario for us. And what we're asking council now is to either shelve the whole project for a little while or keep the bid process for removing the wall open for 2 weeks should be enough to the next council meeting to allow us to, I think the second contractor, if he has more time, can get a bid in. And there's a third contractor that said that they would be happy to do a bid and then hire Juan. So, and he still insists he can do it for $9,500, which is affordable. So we're asking basically for a little more time before the wrought iron fence is put in place. Now, purchasing it is fine. I know Chris wants to purchase it as soon as possible, the materials, because they're probably going to increase in value. But if you could just hold off and actually installing them, and let Juan bid the thing, because it's going to come in way under the $77,000. And it's very important for all of our organizations. I think it's important for the community, because as you can see from those photos, you could see the incredibly clear, beautiful water in the springs as soon as you came into the park. And it would be very nice if we could get to that point again. It would beautify the park, turn the springs into the focal point of the park, which they need to be, constitute historic restoration. And it would also be safer, because that wall doesn't keep anybody out. But once they get in, it keeps them from getting out. The woman that got in a few years ago could have gotten out, but for the wall. She could have reached up to the edge of the springs and pulled herself out, but the wall prevented that. So it's also a safety question. The wrought iron fence will keep everybody out. It's going to satisfy all the requirements for the code for walls around public pools. So I guess we are asking just for another couple of weeks to allow us to get in a bid so we can get that wall down. Otherwise, it's never going to come down, and the spring, the most important spring in Lampasas, is going to continue to be walled off from view for everybody, which is a shame. because
Chris,
Go
you
ahead.
have thoughts on this?
I think that whatever direction council gives me will be my priority.
So we can purchase the fencing and get that solved?
We should certainly go ahead and purchase the fencing now. I mean, material costs are going up by the day. I can't even guarantee that if you've got the fencing, material fencing quote in your packet there, and that quote was only good for a day. So I'm sure it's gone up a little since then.
Could we get a motion and then ask questions from that point if we need to?
Move to approve the purchase of the cost for the fencing material, but not to get to work on anything yet.
Don't do any work yet?
Just purchase the material.
How long are you willing to wait?
Let's say till the next council meeting.
2 weeks? Did everyone understand the motion?
Yeah. We probably can't even get the material delivered within that 2 weeks, so that's safe.
Did we understand the motion?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'd entertain a second.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Now, are there other questions to ask Mr. Cabnis or Chris? Or the other members might wish to contribute?
I do have a question. So am I hearing that we're getting direction to go ahead and solicit more bids for the removal of the rock wall?
Yes. Extend the bidding process until the next council meeting is what I hear.
Let me ask you this. You can't order the fence right now because the fence would move back if you you need more fencing. Is that correct? If they tear the wall down?
No, we're going to go right up against
It'd go right over the
existing
top
rock
of
wall.
that?
Yeah, the fence is going to go right up against the rock wall. It doesn't matter what we do to the wall, the fence is going to still be in the same location.
And between now and then, where's the additional funds going to come from?
That's a good question. I will say that we've got allocated for $40,000 for this project. Fencing right now with purchase and installation is going to be a little over $30,000, but I think the rest of that will be eaten up. There will be some additional cost because we've got to build some kind of water gap out that spillway once we get the fencing up. And we won't have a design for that until the fencing is in place. So there will be some additional cost on the fencing.
So you'll bring those costs back to us along with the bid for whoever is willing to let Mr. Valdez use their license?
I won't be able to bring the water gap cost back to you until we get our fence installed.
Okay.
I mean,
It'll take
I'm looking
specific
at,
measurements.
we have a wall range from 77 to 105.
That's correct.
I mean, we're going to dial that way back.
He's got to get bonded first, though. He got to be licensed. He's got to be
Mayor.
licensed.
We will make sure that,
Right.
that whatever contractor we go to will be insured and be eligible for bonding.
Right.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
was the motion strictly for the fencing material?
Yes, and to extend the bidding out to 2 weeks,
Just the fencing material?
just to purchase the fencing.
If we need to extend the bid out, we need to amend that motion because it was just for the material.
Oh, I thought you said to move it out 2 weeks.
I mean,
Okay, let's amend the motion.
so move to amend the motion to include giving a 2-week extension for bidding.
Second.
Does that fit everyone's criteria here?
And Mayor, just in terms of procedure, you should vote on the amendment first and then vote on the main motion, so you'll
Okay.
actually have two actions.
So the amendment is to purchase the cost of the fencing material and extend the billing out 2 weeks. Is that right?
So the amendment is the extension. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
David.
Still a second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And then the original motion was to approve the cost of the fencing. And we had a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Was that perfectly clear?
Perfect. Does council have any additional direction for staff on this project?
Bless your heart.
Not until the next meeting.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
I have one little thought to leave y'all with. If the city's sick of fooling with Hannah Springs, pending research of some legalities and things, the Historical Commission might be interested in purchasing it from you, just the spring area. Just, I'm not even sure if that's possible, just a little thought. But
Thank you for your thoughts. All right. Are we good? We can adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Everybody in favor? Let's go home.
Aye.
Aye.